It was a calm Saturday morning in Roswell, Georgia. The sky was clear, the air was light, and families moved in and out of grocery stores with weekend ease. The automatic doors of the neighborhood market slid open again and again, welcoming people in with the soft beeping of checkout scanners and the murmur of quiet conversation. Among the shopping crowd was Harold Benson, a 67-year-old retired bus driver. He carried the kind of presence that made strangers feel comfortable, gentle, steady, patient. He wore a faded baseball cap, comfortable walking shoes, and pushed a small cart with only a few items: milk, bread, oranges, and a can of vegetable soup. Harold never rushed. Years of working with the public had taught him that calm was a strength most people underestimated. He walked toward the self-checkout line and waited. There was a mother balancing her toddler, a college student reading a text message, and a cashier nearby guiding customers through the machine. The store was peaceful. Then she entered the frame of the day, though Harold could not have known yet how much her presence would change everything. Her name was Linda Carrington, a 43-year-old office worker known for being outspoken, assertive, and sharp-tongued. She moved quickly, her sandals clacking against the polished floor, her blonde hair tied tightly back. She spoke loudly to someone on her phone, her tone clipped and impatient. As she approached the same self-checkout line, she did not slow down to see who was next. She stepped directly in front of Harold. Harold paused. He assumed she simply hadn't seen him. "Ma'am," he said softly, polite as always, "I believe I was next." The attendant waved me forward. Linda didn't look up from her phone. "Well, I'm already here now," she said, dismissive and sharp. Harold tried again, still gentle. "It's all right. I'll just go ahead after you. I just didn't want to make any confusion." But something about his voice, steady and calm, struck her the wrong way. She turned toward him suddenly, her face tightening. "What are you looking at me like that for?" she demanded. Harold blinked, taken aback. "I wasn't looking at you, ma'am. I'm just waiting." Shoppers nearby looked up. A quiet tension began to form, like the slow gathering of a storm cloud. Linda stepped closer. "You think you can just stand there and talk to me like that?" she said, her voice rising. "You think the rules don't apply to you?" Harold kept his hands loose around the cart handle. His years of experience had taught him what rising anger looked like. Tight movements, fast breathing, unfocused eyes. He wasn't afraid, just disappointed. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "I don't want any trouble. I'm simply waiting to check out. That's all." A store employee, noticing the shift in atmosphere, walked over carefully. "Is everything okay here?" he asked. Linda pointed sharply toward Harold. He cut in line, and now he's acting like I'm the problem. A couple of customers exchanged glances. One began recording, sensing something was unfolding. The young mother with the toddler stepped forward slightly. "I saw him waiting," she offered gently. The cashier did wave him up, but Linda ignored her. Her voice got louder. "Oh, of course," she said dramatically. "Everyone just believes him. Everyone wants to defend him. I'm the one being mistreated here." Her voice echoed across the aisle. Harold lowered his gaze briefly, then lifted it again. Not with anger, but with sadness. "Ma'am, I truly don't want this to go any further," he said. "Let's just let the attendant handle it." But anger makes simple things complicated. Linda shoved the cart between them. The metal frame struck Harold's shin. The can of soup rolled from his cart and clattered onto the floor, the sound ringing loudly in the moment of rising tension. Gasps rippled through the shoppers. A young man in the next checkout whispered, "That's enough," under his breath. Harold slowly bent down to pick up the can. His hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the heaviness of the moment. He had lived a life full of busy streets, late-night bus stops, frustrated passengers, and raised voices. Yet somehow, moments like this still found a way to hurt. He gently placed the can back into his cart. "Ma'am," he said again, quieter now. "This isn't worth hurting someone." But Linda's frustration ignited further. She picked up a can from her own cart and threw it. It struck the floor beside Harold, bouncing once and rolling away onto the checkout stand. Now every phone in the area was recording. "All right," said the store manager, stepping forward with authority. "I'm calling the police." The store fell into complete stillness. Faint sirens began to approach. Customers shifted, whispering. The mother with the toddler wiped a tear from her eyes. Not because of fear, but because moments like this reminded her how fragile humanity still was. Harold exhaled slowly. It felt like the kind of moment that didn't simply pass. It settled, it stayed, and it would not be forgotten. The grocery store air felt heavy, as though the temperature had shifted. People who had been casually pushing carts just moments ago now stood frozen, watching the tension unfold like a scene from a movie. The automatic doors slid open, and the faint wail of approaching sirens grew louder, bouncing off the quiet suburban buildings outside. Harold remained where he was, hands relaxed at his sides, his cart in front of him. The spilled can on the floor had already been picked up, but the memory of the sound, the sharp metallic ring against the ground, lingered like an echo. Linda stood several feet away now, pacing back and forth, her phone still in her hand. Her breathing was uneven, quick. She wasn't yelling anymore, but the emotional storm inside her had not passed. Something in her expression looked unsettled, like she wasn't quite sure how she had gotten here or what would happen next. The doors opened again, this time with purpose. Two officers walked in. Officer Bradley, a tall man with a calm demeanor, stepped forward first. His partner, Officer Cruz, followed slightly behind, taking in the scene with careful eyes. They were experienced enough to sense when the atmosphere was charged, and they felt it instantly. The store manager approached, face anxious and voice tight. "Thank you for coming," he said. "We had a disturbance here. Items were thrown. A customer was shoved with a cart." Officer Bradley nodded. "No one hurt?" "No," the manager replied. "Not physically, but tensions are very high." Bradley and Cruz exchanged a quiet, understanding glance. They had seen situations like this before. Small misunderstandings that grew into something larger, sometimes without either person realizing how far they had gone. Officer Bradley stepped toward Harold. "Sir," he said, steady and respectful, "can you tell me what happened?" Harold looked up at him, not with anger, but with tired acceptance. "Yes," he said. "I was waiting in line. The woman stepped ahead of me. I asked politely. Things escalated. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move toward her. I simply waited." His words were measured, calm. Officer Cruz observed Harold closely. Posture relaxed, breathing steady, hands visible. His tone lacked defensiveness. She took note. This was someone grounded in composure. Then the officers turned to Linda. She was pacing faster now, her fingers gripping her phone tightly. "She's coming undone," Cruz whispered quietly to Bradley, who nodded once. Linda spoke before they asked. "He's lying," she said, voice shaking. "He started it. He was being threatening. I defended myself. I was scared." But her voice held something the officers recognized. Not fear, but guilt mixed with frustration. "Ma'am," Officer Bradley said gently, "take a slow breath. We're just gathering information. We want to understand clearly." She swallowed hard, but her tone sharpened. You don't understand, she insisted. Nobody ever listens to me. Everyone thinks I'm wrong here, but he caused all of this. Officer Cruz remained calm, her voice steady, like steadying a fragile bridge. Ma'am, we're not deciding who's right or wrong. We're just trying to hear what happened, clearly. The mother with the toddler stepped forward slightly. Her voice trembled from the emotional weight of the moment. I saw what happened, she said. The man didn't do anything. He was patient. She moved in front of him, and then she pushed her cart into him. Several others nodded, quietly at first, then more confidently. A college student spoke next. I was right behind them. He didn't say anything rude. She kept raising her voice. One by one, witnesses began to speak. Softly, honestly, with the clarity of truth rising. And with every word, Linda's expression changed. Slowly, the certainty she had carried with so much force began to waver. The officers listened, absorbing every detail, watching every reaction. Then Officer Bradley spoke, his voice level and calm. Ma'am, at this moment, from what we're hearing, this appears to have been a misunderstanding that escalated. No one is being detained. We are advising everyone to step apart and take a breath. Linda stared at him, speechless for the first time since the conflict began. Harold remained quiet, respectful, still, steady. Officer Cruz turned to him. Sir, is there someone we can call for you? A family member? Friend? Harold smiled faintly. No need, he said. I've handled harder things than this. There was a quiet dignity in his voice, the kind that comes only from a lifetime of choosing patience over pride. But suddenly, Linda's voice returned. She pointed toward Harold, her words sharp and cutting. You think you look righteous right now, she said. But you made me react. You made me look like the bad one. The room held its breath. Harold looked at her. But his eyes were not angry. They were full of a sadness so deep that it softened even the air around him. I didn't make you do anything, he said softly. We all choose how to respond. That's the one thing no one can take from us. His voice was gentle, but the truth inside it was heavy. For a moment, a brief, trembling moment, Linda's face collapsed. Her defenses, her frustration, her certainty, all of it flickered. And behind it, for just a second, was something like realization. But realizations don't always come as acceptance. Sometimes they come as silence. Officer Bradley stepped between them, keeping calm space. Both of you, he said quietly, should take a moment outside, separate, breathe. This situation has reached its limit inside the store. The store manager nodded. Yes, please, let's move outside. Everyone just needs space. Harold gently pushed his cart toward the doors. Linda followed, slower now, quieter. Her expression caught somewhere between anger and reflection. Customers watched in silence as the automatic doors opened and the sunlight spilled across the parking lot. And in that space, the story was not over. It was about to deepen. Because sometimes, conflict is not about the moment itself, but what the moment reveals. The late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the parking lot, painting everything in soft gold. The automatic doors closed behind Harold and Linda, sealing away the murmurs and cautious eyes of the customers inside. Outside, the air felt cooler, quieter, like the world itself had paused to watch what would happen next. Harold stood near his car, hands placed lightly on the handle of his cart. He wasn't tense. He wasn't defensive. He looked steady, as though he knew something about life that could not be shaken by raised voices or pointed fingers. Linda, on the other hand, stood several steps away. Her breathing was uneven again, and her fingers tightened around her phone. A part of her looked like she wanted to keep fighting, but a deeper part looked uncertain, confused even. It was the look of someone who did not fully understand why they had reacted the way they did. Officer Bradley and Officer Cruz joined them outside. The officers did not stand aggressively. No hands on belts, no raised voices. They simply stood, present, steady, giving space for truth to settle. The parking lot was quiet except for the soft hum of distant traffic. Officer Cruz spoke first, her tone gentle. "Ma'am, we're outside now. Let's breathe. Tell us, in your own words, what made you feel threatened?" Linda's voice cracked, not with anger this time, but with something she didn't expect: vulnerability. I don't know," she said. "I felt rushed. I felt judged. I felt like I was losing control of something." She looked down at her shoes, avoiding everyone's eyes. "I just wanted to shop and get home," she whispered. Harold listened, his posture calm. There was no triumph in his expression, no satisfaction, only quiet understanding, because he had seen this before, many times. Officer Bradley nodded slowly. "It sounds like the moment overwhelmed you," he said. Linda swallowed hard. "Yes, maybe. I didn't mean to let it get that far. I really didn't." The wind moved gently through the trees lining the parking lot. A leaf drifted onto the pavement. Harold spoke now. His voice was low, steady, and warm. "Stress makes all of us react in ways we don't expect," he said. "Life piles up on us quietly, and sometimes it spills out in the wrong moment." Linda looked up at him, surprised. She had expected anger. She had expected judgment. But Harold offered neither. "However," he continued, his tone firm but not harsh, "each of us is responsible for how we treat others, even on difficult days." Linda blinked, her throat tightening. "I know," she said softly. I thought if I didn't defend myself, I'd be the one pushed aside." Harold nodded once. "I understand that fear," he said. "But reacting from fear often hurts the wrong person." Silence settled between them, not heavy, but thoughtful. For the first time since the conflict began, Linda's shoulders dropped. Her face softened. She was no longer trying to win. She was trying to understand. A mother pushing a stroller passed by a few feet away, giving a small, sympathetic glance. Not to one person, but to both. Officer Cruz folded her hands in front of her. "This moment can either become something you regret," she said gently, "or something you learn from." Linda looked at Harold, and her voice trembled. "I'm sorry," she said. Not rushed, not forced, real. The word hung in the air like something fragile and rare. Harold nodded once, not quick, not dismissive, but deeply. "Thank you," he said softly. The apology wasn't dramatic. It didn't change everything about either of them, but it was enough to turn the direction of the day. Linda wiped her eyes. "I didn't even know why I reacted like that," she admitted. "I guess I've been carrying things I haven't dealt with." Harold's expression reflected understanding, not pity. "We all carry things," he said, "but we don't have to carry them alone." Officer Bradley spoke gently now. "There's no need for charges. No one wants this to follow either of you. Let's all walk away with clarity instead of conflict." Linda nodded, her voice almost a whisper. "Yes, please." Harold took a breath, steady. "There is one thing I'd like to say," he said. The officer stepped back a little, giving space. Harold looked directly at Linda. "Calm, grounded. When you feel overwhelmed, it's easy to see everyone as a threat. I've been there. But the person in front of you is rarely the enemy. Most of us are just trying to make it through the day. Linda looked down again, tears gathering. I never wanted to become someone who lashes out, she whispered. Then you won't, Harold replied gently. You have a choice in the next moment, and the next, and the one after that. The wind moved again, cooler this time, softer, like the world was exhaling. Linda gave a small, shaky breath. Thank you for not yelling back. For not making it worse. Harold smiled, just barely. Someone has to be the calm in the room, he said. Today it happened to be me. Tomorrow it might be you. Linda nodded, absorbing the words, letting them settle. Officer Cruz stepped forward with a soft smile. I think we're done here, she said gently. No paperwork, no warnings, just understanding. Officer Bradley added, both of you showed honesty today. That matters more than anything. Linda turned toward her car. She paused, looking back just once, not with bitterness, but with quiet respect. Harold watched her go. He didn't feel victorious. He didn't feel wronged. He simply felt grounded, rooted in who he was. He placed his groceries in his trunk, slowly, thoughtfully. Then he stood still for a moment, looking at the sky. The day felt lighter now. Not because everything was perfect, but because he had chosen patience over pride, understanding over ego, peace over reaction, and the world had shifted. Even if just a little. The sky continued to glow in soft amber light as Harold finished loading his groceries into the trunk. The parking lot had returned to its usual rhythm. Car engines hummed. Birds chirped near the edges of the pavement. Shopping carts clicked against the pavement as people wheeled them along. Life resumed its ordinary motion. Yet, something in the air felt changed. Harold closed the trunk with a gentle push and leaned against the car for a moment, allowing himself to breathe. The situation had stirred something familiar inside him. Not anger, not resentment, something deeper. A memory of other moments, just like this one. Times where he had needed to remain steady so the moment did not collapse into something far worse. He knew the officers had walked away thinking the situation was over. In a practical sense, it was. No charges, no danger, no escalation. But for Harold, the echo remained. It always did. Every time something like this happened, it stayed with him long after the world continued forward. He sat in the driver's seat and rested both hands on the steering wheel. He did not start the engine yet. Instead, he stared straight ahead, watching the color of the sky shift toward evening blue. There was a reason he had reacted the way he did. Calm, patient, steady. It was not simply his nature. It was something learned. It went back years. Before the town. Before this supermarket. Before the quiet life he had built piece by piece. He fought back to when he was a young man, working his first job at a warehouse loading trucks. The days had been long. The air inside the building stale and hot. Everyone was tired. Everyone was trying to survive. And sometimes, when people are tired, they throw their burdens at whoever is closest. He had been on the receiving end of that more than once. A shift supervisor had once shouted at him in front of everyone, accusing him of slacking off, even though Harold was working as hard as anyone else there. The memory of that moment had burned itself into him, not because of the embarrassment. Not because of the embarrassment, but because of how close he had come to reacting in a way that would have cost him everything. He had wanted to shout back, to fight, to make the supervisor feel the same humiliation. But something held him back. His grandmother's voice, It returned to him now as clearly as if she were sitting beside him. Sometimes strength is choosing not to answer the fire with fire. He remembered how she used to sit on her porch at dusk, rocking slowly and watching the neighborhood children run past. He remembered how she used to sit on her porch at dusk, rocking slowly and watching the neighborhood children run past. She had always spoken calmly, even when the world felt loud. She had lived through things far heavier than words in a grocery store. Yet, she had carried a softness inside her that nothing had managed to steal away. Harold had taken that with him into adulthood, although at times it felt difficult to hold on to. Back in the present moment, the last of the sunlight stretched across the hood of his car. The warmth of it eased the tightness in his shoulders. He let himself breathe deeper, grounding himself again. He understood something about life that many people did not learn until much later. Most conflict does not begin with cruelty. It begins with overwhelm, with exhaustion, with fear people do not know how to name. He had seen it in coworkers, in strangers, in neighbors, and now in Linda. She had not meant to attack him personally. She had simply been standing in the wrong place inside her own heart. A place built from stress and pressure and expectations she no longer felt capable of meeting. Her reaction was wrong, but it made sense. Harold closed his eyes, not to escape, but to reflect. He was not angry with her. He was simply tired of situations like this repeating, in different forms, with different faces. Yet he still believed there was a better way. And that belief, more than anything, kept him steady. When he finally started the engine and pulled out of the parking spot, the evening had fully settled in. Streetlights were beginning to flicker on, one by one. The sky shifted from gold to deep blue. He drove slowly, no rush, no urgency, just steady movement toward home. As he turned onto his street, a sense of quiet familiarity met him. Well-kept lawns, children playing near the sidewalk, couples walking dogs, windows glowing with warm indoor light. The world continued forward, unaware of the small lessons exchanged in a supermarket aisle and a parking lot earlier that day. He parked in his driveway and sat still again before getting out. His home stood before him, a place built with patience and discipline, a place where peace was not only desired, but protected. He carried the groceries inside and set them on the kitchen counter. The house welcomed him with silence, not empty silence, but peaceful silence, the kind that allowed him to exhale. He took a moment to steady himself and placed his hands on the counter. There were many people like Linda in the world, people overwhelmed and carrying more than they knew how to hold, people who reacted first and understood later. It would happen again, somewhere else, with someone else, another day. But he would remain himself. He took pride in that, quiet pride, the kind that does not need recognition. In another part of town, Linda sat alone in her living room, the lights dimmed. The quiet in her home was different, not peaceful, heavy. She replayed the day over and over again in her mind, surprised by her own behavior. She felt ashamed, confused, and unsure of herself. She did not know what to do with those feelings yet, but something inside had shifted. The moment that had begun as conflict was slowly becoming something else. The start of understanding. The beginning of change. The day was not over for either of them. Something new was forming. Something human. Something real. Something that would matter in the days ahead. The next morning began quietly. Soft daylight filtered into Harold's kitchen as he brewed a fresh pot of coffee. The aroma filled the room slowly, warm and grounding. He moved through his morning routine without hurry. He watered the small plants by the window. He wiped down the counter. He ate a simple breakfast. Everything felt calm, peaceful. Yet the memory of yesterday still lived somewhere inside him. Not heavy, not painful, just present. Like a page in a book, still marked, waiting to be read again. After finishing breakfast, Harold stepped outside to check the mailbox. The air was cool. The street was starting to wake. A jogger passed by. A car started down the block. Sprinklers clicked softly in a neighbor's yard. As he opened the mailbox, he glanced down the street and noticed something unexpected. A familiar car, parked at the far end of the road. It was Linda's car. She was sitting inside, hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. Her face looked tense, as if she had been gathering courage before stepping out. For a moment, Harold thought she might simply drive away. But then the door opened. She stepped out slowly. Her movements were careful. Her breathing looked uneven, like someone preparing to say something difficult. She did not look angry. She did not look defensive. She looked unsure. Harold did not move toward her. He remained where he was, waiting. He had learned long ago that sometimes patience was the strongest response a person could offer. Linda hesitated, then began walking up the street. Each step seemed heavier than the last. When she finally reached him, she stood several feet away and did not speak at first. Her eyes were full of emotion she did not yet know how to name. Harold did not force the moment. He simply waited. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The morning air held the silence gently. Finally, Linda took a slow breath. Her voice, when it came, was soft and unsteady. "I was wrong yesterday." The words were quiet, but they carried weight. Even without trying to defend herself, she still felt the sting of her actions. It was written across her face. She looked down, unable to hold eye contact, as if afraid of what she might see reflected back. Harold's posture remained relaxed, his breathing steady, his expression calm. He had known this day would come eventually, not because he demanded apology, but because he understood how people grow. Understanding takes time. But when it comes, it always arrives quietly. Linda continued slowly. "I should not have spoken to you like that. I made assumptions. I reacted without thinking. And I embarrassed myself." Her voice cracked with the final sentence. She swallowed hard, fighting to keep her composure. Harold nodded once, not harsh, not triumphant, just acknowledging her courage in admitting it. Silence returned, but it felt different now. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Linda lifted her eyes again. She looked tired. Not physically, but emotionally, like someone who had finally stopped running from something inside herself. "I do not want to be that kind of person," she said. "I do not want to treat people like that." This time, Harold spoke. His voice was calm and level. "We all have days where we fall short of ourselves. What matters is what we do after." The words were gentle, no judgment, no sharpness, just truth. Linda took another breath and her shoulders softened. The tension she carried began to release. Harold did not need to say anything more. The lesson had already planted itself. Linda stood quietly for a moment, looking at him as if seeing him properly for the first time. Not as a stranger, not as someone to defend herself against, but as another person, living his life, carrying his own history and weight. "Thank you for your patience yesterday," she said. "Thank you for not making it worse." Harold nodded again. "Patience is something I try to practice." He did not say it with pride, just with sincerity. A soft breeze moved through the quiet street. The leaves rustled. Morning birds called from the trees above. Linda wiped her eyes gently, not dramatically, just a small gesture of someone letting go. "I hope we can start again," she said softly. Then she turned to leave, walking back toward her car. Not hurried, not ashamed, just thoughtful. Harold remained by his mailbox, watching her go. Not to linger on the moment, but to recognize that it mattered. This exchange was small, yet meaningful. Life often changed through small shifts instead of grand moments. Respect restored, understanding rebuilt. A small step forward. When Linda drove away, Harold returned inside the house and sat at his dining table. He looked out the window, watching light move slowly across the yard. His grandmother's voice came back to him once again. Sometimes strength is choosing not to answer the fire with fire. He realized now how deeply that lesson had shaped him. Not just in moments of conflict, but in the gentle, quiet steps afterward. He sipped his coffee. The morning continued. The world continued. But something inside both of them had changed. Not dramatically, not loudly. Softly, quietly, meaningfully. This was how healing often began, with a pause, an understanding, and a step forward. The day moved on quietly for Harold. After the conversation with Linda, he felt a gentle stillness settle inside him. It was not relief, exactly. More like confirmation. A reminder that patience, when practiced, eventually shows its worth. He finished a small list of tasks around the house. He swept the back porch. He tightened a loose hinge on the screen door. He organized a drawer that had needed attention for months. Each action was slow and unhurried. The kind of work that steadies the mind. In the early afternoon, Harold stepped into his garage. The light bulb above flickered softly as it warmed to life. Against the back wall sat an old wooden chest. The surface was worn smooth with age. The corners slightly frayed, the latch still strong. Harold placed his hand on the lid and paused. He had not opened this chest in nearly 7 years. Inside were pieces of the life he rarely spoke about. The life that shaped the man who could stand calm in the face of anger. The life that taught him to hold still when others were loud. He lifted the lid. Inside were carefully folded uniforms, photos, certificates, old metal pins, a pair of scuffed combat boots, and at the very top, resting neatly in a small velvet box, was a medal. He picked it up gently. The medal was heavy, solid, and full of history. The sort of honor that was earned through experience that left marks far deeper than anything held in public view. He sat down on the low wooden stool in the garage. The air was still. The faint smell of engine oil and cedar hung around him. He remembered. Not a vivid flashback, not a dramatic rush, just the steady awareness of where he had once been, and who he had been then. Years ago, Harold had served in the military, not for recognition, not for pride, but because he believed in duty. He believed in protecting others. He believed in stepping forward when others stepped back. He had seen difficult things, hard things. He had learned that real courage did not come through loudness or threat. It came through control, through steadiness, through quiet choices made when emotions burned hot. War did not make him bitter. It made him responsible. He learned how to de-escalate instead of confront, how to reduce harm instead of increase it, how to choose peace even when conflict felt easier. He became someone who understood himself deeply. After he returned home, he continued serving, not with weapons, but with guidance. He worked in security training programs. He helped younger officers learn to handle stress. He taught them that authority did not mean superiority. It meant accountability. But one day, while traveling home after a long session, he received a phone call that left a scar deeper than any battlefield. The call was about his brother. His brother had struggled for years with the pressures of life. Stress, responsibility, the quiet weight that builds slowly and silently inside a person. Harold had always tried to support him, to be present, to help lift what could be lifted. But that day, his brother had lost the battle inside his heart. Harold remembered the silence after he heard the news. A silence that felt heavier than sound could ever hold. The kind of silence that changes something permanent inside you. From that day forward, Harold understood something with unshakable clarity. Every person carries an unseen story. Every face holds a weight we do not know. Every sudden reaction has a history behind it. So when people became aggressive, angry, or defensive, Harold did not meet them with force. He met them with recognition, not agreement, not acceptance of bad behavior, but awareness, because people do not become who they are by accident. They are shaped, injured, guided, influenced, burdened, and sometimes they simply do not know how to carry what they feel. Harold placed the metal back inside the chest and closed the lid gently. He understood why Linda had acted the way she had. Not because it was right, but because she was a person still learning, still growing, still dealing with whatever weight lived inside her that day. He also knew that change could happen in the quiet aftermath of conflict. It did not require lectures, or anger, or winning. It required example. And yesterday, he had been the example someone else needed. Harold stood, brushed the dust from his hands, and walked back outside. The afternoon sunlight was warm. The shadows stretched long across the yard. He closed his eyes for a moment and breathed deeply. He did not live loudly. He did not seek attention. He did not try to prove anything. He simply tried to live in a way that honored the lessons life had carved into him. Later that evening, as he sat on the porch, watching the sky fade into soft shades of orange and purple, he heard footsteps approaching. He looked up. A young boy from the neighborhood stood at the edge of his walkway. The boy held a small model airplane, the kind that had once belonged to Harold's brother. The boy spoke quietly, almost shyly. "My dad says you're a hero." Harold smiled gently. Not a big smile, but a warm one. "No," he said. "I am just someone who has seen enough to know what matters." The boy nodded thoughtfully, as though he understood more than his age suggested. The two of them sat together in comfortable silence as the last of the daylight slipped away. There was no need for explanation. Some truths did not need to be spoken to be understood. Evening settled across the neighborhood. The sunlight softened into a calm purple-blue tone, the kind of quiet evening that makes the world feel slower. Harold remained on the porch for a long time after the boy left, sitting comfortably in the old wooden chair, listening to the soft chorus of cicadas and distant cars rolling down the main road. The gentle breeze carried the faint smell of freshly cut grass. Porch lights flickered on, one by one, across the street. The neighborhood looked peaceful, almost like nothing had ever happened there. But for Harold, something had changed, not in the world around him, but inside the people who shared that space. The next morning, as he stepped outside to get the mail, he noticed something unusual. There, near the edge of his walkway, sat a small cardboard box, neatly taped, placed intentionally. Harold brought it inside and opened it at the kitchen counter. Inside the box was a homemade loaf of bread wrapped in foil, a small jar of honey, and a handwritten note. The handwriting was slightly shaky, as though the writer had rewritten it several times. The note read, "Thank you for the way you handled everything. I was wrong. I am learning. I'm sorry, Linda." Harold stood still for a moment, the note resting lightly between his fingertips. He read it a second time, not because he needed to, but because he recognized the courage it took to write those words. Not everyone apologizes. Not everyone admits misunderstanding. Not everyone grows. But sometimes, one calm moment can change the direction of an entire situation. Harold folded the note gently and placed it in the drawer with a few other things he kept. Things that reminded him what humanity was capable of when given time to breathe. Later that week, the community slowly began to adjust. People who once only glanced politely now paused a little longer. Neighbors waved more genuinely. A few even came by to talk, say greetings, or simply ask how he was doing. Not because Harold demanded respect, but because he earned it through patience, clarity, and presence. One morning, as Harold sat on the porch with a cup of warm tea, the same boy from before walked by with his father. The boy waved excitedly. The father paused, extended a respectful nod, and said quietly, "We see you. Thank you." Harold nodded back. No need for extra words. He was not the center of the neighborhood. He was not the focus of attention. He was simply a steady presence, one that people now trusted. And trust, he knew, was one of the most valuable things a community could share. A few days later, Linda approached his porch. She walked with careful, thoughtful steps. She stood at the edge, hands clasped in front of her, unsure of how to begin. Harold did not make it difficult. He gently said, "Good morning, Linda." She breathed out, relieved to not face resistance. "I didn't understand," she admitted softly. "I reacted from fear, not reason. I'm trying to do better." She began smiling at neighbors she once overlooked. She asked questions instead of assuming answers. She made space for people to show who they really were. Not because Harold demanded an apology, but because kindness has weight. And when practiced sincerely, it influences more than one moment. It spreads. Weeks passed. Life continued. The leaves began to change color, turning the streets into warm shades of gold and red. Neighbors walked their dogs. Children played outside again. The neighborhood felt like a place of connection rather than tension. And Harold remained exactly who he had always been. A quiet reminder that strength is not loud, courage is not force, leadership is not control. Sometimes the strongest person is the one who chooses patience when anger feels easier. Sometimes the most powerful change happens in silence. Sometimes the hero of the story is the one who never had to raise his voice. And that's where today's story comes to a close. A reminder that respect is not something we shout to demand. It is something we show. It is something we live. And in return, it is something that grows. If you enjoyed this story and want more like it, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and comment your thoughts below. Thank you for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.